So far this century, the theological issues that have been splitting Christian denominations are the questions of LGBT identity, homosexuality, and same-sex marriage. When new denominations have been formed, in the great majority of cases, it's the traditionalists leaving, while the main denomination moves to be LGBT affirming. This is what happened in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which saw many non-affirming churches leave for newer traditionalist denominations, Lutheran Congregations in Mission for Christ, founded in 2001, and the North American Lutheran Church, founded 2010. In 2009, the ELCA allowed ordination of non-celibate gay and lesbian people, and today the LCMC has over 1,000 congregations and the NALC over 500. The Presbyterian Church USA allowed same-sex marriages in 2015, and between 2012 and 2017 had over 300 churches leave to join a new denomination, ECO, a covenant order of evangelical Presbyterians. Similar situations led to the formation of the non-affirming denomination Anglican Church in North America in 2009, a split from the Episcopal Church, and the Covenant Brethren Church, a 2020 split from the Church of the Brethren over this issue. The most well-known example is the United Methodists, which saw thousands of churches leave beginning in 2019, followed by the formation of a traditionalist denomination in 2022, the Global Methodist Church, which now counts over 5,000 U.S. congregations. The UMC then formally allowed same-sex marriage and the ordination of LGBT clergy at their General Conference in May 2024. In all of these cases, before the denominations became allowing of same-sex marriage and LGBT clergy, there was a time in which they did not hold that stance, and that the majority of their membership were opposed to those practices. For denominations like the Church of the Nazarene, which has in their manual the statement, "We believe the practice of same-sex sexual intimacy is contrary to God's will for human sexuality," they have doubtless been looking on at these other denominations and wondering if there will come a time when this fight will come to their own doors. In these other denominations that are now officially LGBT affirming, the views of ministers and membership slowly shifted over time until a great number no longer agreed with their own church's policy. For example, this survey of ministers in the Presbyterian Church USA in 2008 showed that 53% wanted to allow sexually active gays and lesbians to be ordained in the denomination 7 years before that actually was allowed. Since Americans as a whole believe that same-sex marriage is morally acceptable by a wide margin, churches that want to see their denomination maintain a countercultural position are beginning to look for signs of churches in their denomination that are not on the same page. If those who want to change the denomination's position to being LGBT affirming are not allowed to promote their views in the denomination until they've gained a majority, then perhaps it's the affirming churches that will leave and the denomination will stay traditionalist. On April 10, 2023, the Board of General Superintendents of the Church of the Nazarene sent a memo to the church's regional directors and superintendents. In it was a ruling which said the Articles of Faith, the Covenant of Christian Character, and the Covenant of Christian Conduct are essential statements of the doctrine of the Church of the Nazarene, as well as those portions of the manual pertaining to what we believe and how we live in light of those beliefs. This provided some additional ammunition for formal discipline against ministers who were out of alignment with the Covenant of Christian Conduct statements on marriage and sexuality, or any other part of the covenant. The Church of the Nazarene has over 500,000 members in the U.S. and Canada in over 4,300 congregations. Worldwide, there are over 2.7 million members in 30,000 congregations. It's the largest non-Pentecostal holiness denomination in the world. And so far, none of the holiness denominations in the U.S. are LGBT affirming. But in a denomination as large as the Church of the Nazarene, there are bound to be people whose views have changed on this and other issues. And not just people in the pews, but even ministers and teachers. When a minister comes to hold views that differ from the official denominational position, there's a few options. One can simply leave and perhaps join a church that matches their views. One can also stay silent about their views to avoid conflict and maintain the status quo. Or one can choose to speak up and try to promote their views and maybe even get the denomination to change, or at least to tolerate internal difference of opinion. It's this third option that Thomas J. Ord chose to take. For over 30 years, Ord has been an elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and he taught at Nazarene colleges. Some of his books, like Relational Holiness, were published through official publishing houses of the Church of the Nazarene. In 2023, along with his daughter Alexa, Ord edited and published the book Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Be Fully LGBTQ+ Affirming, which was a 400-plus page anthology of articles by various Nazarene-connected authors. Some of the authors were current or former laypersons in the Church of the Nazarene, and some others were former deacons or elders who had moved to other denominations or were on their way out of the Nazarene Church. For example, Brandon Smee was a Nazarene, but never ordained in the Church of the Nazarene, though he has since been ordained in the Episcopal Church. Taryn Udali was an ordained Nazarene elder who wrote in her part of the book, I Am Leaving the Church of the Nazarene, and Daniel Rodriguez Schlorf left the Church of the Nazarene and is a minister in a church affiliated with the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches. However, Ord himself and several of the other writers were active Nazarene clergy, and the book that they were writing was extremely critical of their church. For example, the description to one chapter said, The Church of the Nazarene taught me that abusing children is acceptable and lying to members is expected. Beyond that, the book was telling the Church of the Nazarene that it was wrong and that it needed to abandon its long-standing positions on sexuality. The first solid consequences from the book landed on Pastor D. Kelly of San Diego First Church of the Nazarene. He wrote the chapter A Hope for Change, in which he supported blessing same-sex marriages. The superintendent of his district, the Southern California district, asked for his resignation. When he refused, a hearing process began that led to a church trial on August 11, 2023. Kelly was found guilty by the Regional Board of Discipline, and his credentials were revoked. Ord himself had a church trial on July 25, 2024. The result was not only his defrocking as a minister, but his expulsion as a member of the Church of the Nazarene. Also in 2024, Jim Sharn, pastor of Laverne Community Church, was asked to enact discipline on two church members in a same-sex relationship. He refused, but voluntarily surrendered his credentials and founded a new congregation not in the Church of the Nazarene. In April 2024, Rick Power, the superintendent of the Hawaii Pacific District, was asked to resign after failing to discipline a district employee who had officiated at a same-sex wedding 5 years prior. The employee happened to be his daughter. Power claimed to have not violated any church rules, saying, I have continued to serve in the church, mindful of my ordination vows, never teaching or promoting views contrary to our manual statements. His resignation as district superintendent didn't lower the heat, however, and after formal accusations were filed with his district, which would have led to a church trial, in December 2024, he announced his resignation as an elder. In October 2024, J.R. Forasteros, who had authored a chapter in Ord's book, announced on his Substack that he too was removed both as a minister and member in the Church of the Nazarene. When he planted a new church, the Haven Collective, on Easter Sunday 2024, he had failed to follow proper procedures to ensure the church was part of the denomination. After a warning on June 24, Forasteros was informed on August 7 that he had been removed for serving without approval in a non-Nazarene church. Forasteros wrote of the ordeal, Bureaucracy allows those in power to hide behind red tape if they want to, but those who sit behind the desk always have scissors that can cut through the tape. I have no doubt that if I were kissing the ring, so to speak, rather than standing for those our denomination is harming, those in power above me would have bent over backwards to make sure the lack of a singular form didn't cost me my ministry credentials. This was a bloodless, expedient way to get me out of the denomination. In December 2024, ordained Nazarene minister James Young, who wrote a chapter in Ord's book, surrendered his credentials. He wrote in the article, We are never ever getting back together. I'm leaving the only denomination I've ever known, and though I'm positive I will connect with another church network, I refuse to be part of a church that prioritizes institutional goals over loving others and making Christ-like disciples. I'm done with the institutional church. This brings us to 2025. In May, big news. Reverend John Middendorf, senior pastor of First Church of the Nazarene in Oklahoma City, announced that his congregation had taken a vote to exit the denomination, and 98% voted to do so. Well, kind of. Middendorf claims that technically the church was never really part of the denomination, and that the vote was to end its spiritual affiliation, as they only consider themselves to have been independent partners with the Church of the Nazarene. And there's good reason to say that, because if the church really is part of the denomination, they can't just up and leave. At the end of the month, the Oklahoma district of the Church of the Nazarene sued the church, which now calls itself OKC First, claiming that the district holds rights to the church building and property. This may all sound familiar if you followed what happened with the United Methodists. Like the UMC, the Church of the Nazarene has a trust clause, meaning that churches that want to leave must either come to an agreement or they must get out of the pews, literally, and find a new place to meet, surrendering their assets to the denomination. In some cases, arguments of special exceptions have worked for some Methodist churches, and maybe OKC First will prevail with a similar exception here. So why did this church want to leave? A hint may be found on the back of J. Ord's book, because there's an endorsement of the book from John Middendorf right there. Middendorf also has had a bit of a brush-up with his denomination back in 2018 when he faced a trial over a baby dedication he presided at where the parents were a lesbian couple. According to the Oklahoma Gazette, Middendorf was convicted in the church trial but not punished. Middendorf says about why OKC First is leaving the denomination, "We did not vote to disaffiliate because of LGBTQ issues. That has been the understanding outside of the church, but there were 3 key issues that drove our decision, and the most important has been a fundamental disagreement between the people of OKC First and the larger Nazarene Church over how people are drawn to Christ. It's not by exclusion and threats, it's via an open table where all are welcome." Less reported was that another Oklahoma City congregation, 8th Street Church, also voted to leave the denomination in April, and so far there's been no lawsuit for them. In June, another ally of Ord was removed from the denomination. Steve McCormick, a retired seminary professor, had been notified by his district superintendent in May that charges had been brought against him. McCormick had written in the book and testified in favor of Ord at his church trial. But before he could get a trial of his own, on June 4, he was defrocked due to a more technical matter: failure to submit a required annual report to the denomination in 3 years. All of these examples show that, for now, certain parts of the Church of the Nazarene are working to enforce their current standards, and little by little they are removing those who are in opposition to those standards. But is this really drawing a line that will now never be crossed? Or is it just a short chapter, making a few small efforts, while the membership and clergy grow more open to full LGBT acceptance? When interviewed by the Christian Post about his defrocking in 2023, D. Kelly said of his church, San Diego First Church of the Nazarene, "The church has a beautiful diversity of viewpoints, and they exhibit the important trait of maintaining unity in the midst of diverse viewpoints. They have been incredibly kind, supportive, and encouraging to me throughout this process." Baptist News Global reported that when Kelly bade farewell to his congregation, members gave him 2 standing ovations. And the story of OKC First shows us that this isn't a standalone case. There are other congregations in the Church of the Nazarene that are willing to revisit the Nazarene position on human sexuality. And there are also professors and staff at Nazarene schools that feel the same way. Idaho State Senator Brian Lenny posted photos on X of Northwest Nazarene University displaying pro-LGBT books on campus. It's likely that there will be a lot more talk about this issue in the Church of the Nazarene a decade from now, and we'll be looking back at what has happened in the last couple years as the opening shots in a bigger battle.